the chat. If you click on the little box to the left of the share screen, you'll see chat, and you can type in a message and send out some love to the poets especially who are our guests today. So we'll be reading in alternate order, starting with a poet on the West Coast and then moving alphabetically to the East Coast and then back and forth between the coast. So it is my privilege to lead off, therefore. I've been reading Liz Gonzalez's poetry for over a quarter century. Of the young poets who showed up for a workshop I was leading at Beyond Baroque back in the mid-1990s, Liz Gonzalez was easily one of the most promising. And it's been a pleasure to see her work show up in a number of anthologies in the years since. She has more than fulfilled that early promise and is now a poet whose work keeps me in touch with the most meaningful sources of the imagination. I know a few poets whose candor find such graceful equilibrium in poignant humor. I present Liz Gonzalez.
Yay. Oh, okay, there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. And thank you, Bill, for the wonderful introduction. I'm going to start with the poem that I workshopped in your workshop back in the day that I recently came across, and it's relevant to what's happening today. You're not like a real Mexican. You're like us, declared my Dolly Parton Dew co-worker. She beamed at me from her chair behind her desk as though she had given me a compliment. I walked around her desk and stood next to her, looked her in the eye and said, "Oh yeah? How's that?" Smiling with pride, she explained, "My dad was a dentist, and Wednesday was Medi-Cal Day. The farm workers used to come in throngs of families. You know, dirty, probably have bugs, too dumb to learn English, immigrants. I was always afraid they'd steal something or rape me. Those men really go for blondes because they don't have any over there." I didn't tell her that in Mexico, there are real blondes without bleached frost jobs, or that my father's mom, who used to pick crops, had blonde hair and blue eyes. I was too stunned to think of sharp comebacks, but I managed to say this: "My dad could have been one of your dad's patients, and here I am today, working beside you in the same office." This next poem is a newer poem, and then I'll end with a poem from my book. My backyard garden office. The camellias and bougainvillea came with the house, giving me a head start. First, we planted the nopal in honor of Grandma's cactus garden that I saw only in a photograph. By the time I was born, she cooked with nopalitos from a jar. Next, a row of roses, dainty white, joyful nectarine, optimistic yellow, and fragrant lavender, a reminiscence of the roses that greeted us on the walkway to Grandma's front door. Then a lemon and an orange tree to bring my San Bernardino Valley roots back to me. When the weather is right, I unfold the beach lounger beneath palm fronds and read. I write at the bistro table on the covered patio, surrounded by potted plants. Jade I cut from Grandma's yard decades ago, black zortkop, aloe vera, and ferns. Nearby, my tortie cat pounces on a grasshopper. A bee chases a monarch off golden milkweed blooms. And an Allen's hummingbird, that copper-orange flame perched on a power line, plummets to the purple velvet spikes on the Mexican sage. My writing process is like my gardening. Deadhead to spark new buds, leave the leaves to nurture the soil, and weed with tools, not toxic spray. Dig deep enough to root and thrive. Harvest too early, and some fruits won't ripen. Too late, and they'll rot. Search for birds' nests before trimming. I garden to find an image, figure out whether to discard or restore, and gain a new perspective. My backyard garden, where Grandma's nopal writes odes to the sky, and my palabras push upward from the soil and unfurl in the sunlight. And my last poem from my book, Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, is the Mexican Jesus sings lead tenor in the Our Lady of Guadalupe Teen Choir. The Mexican Jesus is a guy at my church who has dulce de leche skin and looks like the Christ statue flocked with white lilies on Easter morning. The Mexican Jesus, blue-black, just washed, resurrected Christ hair hangs free. Grandma says, it's disgraceful. That boy comes to God's house all greñudo. He should at least pull it back in a ponytail. I point at the long-locked effigy stretched out on the bronze cross floating above the altar and whisper, what about him? She digs her fingernails into my thigh and hisses, cállate el hocico, diablita. I don't care what she thinks of me. She just insulted my maybe future boyfriend. The Mexican Jesus is a junior at San Bernardino High and makes straight B's. When he graduates, he's going to take classes at the local JC. Patty, my best friend, told me so. The Mexican Jesus is too old for me. I'm 13 going on 14, but I joined the choir for the summer anyway, to be close to him. Mama even lets me take the bus by myself from the bench to the west side for rehearsals. Otherwise, I'll lie on my stale sheets all day, eating watermelon and running the water cooler. The choir is the answer to her prayers. The Mexican Jesus doesn't pay attention to Bridget, Patty's 16-year-old sister who has sparkly eyes for him. She keeps her mean eye on me. She's jealous of me ever since the night she thought the cutest boy at the Tomorrowland dance crossed the floor to take her hand, but asked for mine instead. The Mexican Jesus comes to every rehearsal. So do I. The choir rehearses twice a week and sings at the Saturday evening and Sunday afternoon masses. This is more church than I'm used to, though I don't feel more holy. The Mexican Jesus stands in front of me in the choir. When he sings his solo, his arms and bony body tremble like he's walking on water. His head nods up and down fast, making his long hair ripple and swing. He belts out, Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. And I imagine combing his wet hair with my fingers after he steps out of the public pool. His locks spilling into my open hands, splashing my face like a waterfall. The Mexican Jesus and I stand on the opposite end from Bridget, who I catch throwing me dirty looks. She knows what I'm thinking. The Mexican Jesus looks so cute driving his dad's beige Rambler to the choir's fundraisers. We all meet early on Saturday mornings at La Plaza Park to wash cars or sell fireworks. Bridget and I wear the shortest shorts we're allowed because Patty told us we have the kind of legs boys like. The Mexican Jesus stays too busy talking to customers, counting money to notice us. The Mexican Jesus and the choir take a bus trip to Oceanside, strung up in a new pink and brown bikini that Bridget could never look so good in. I ignore the riptide signs, wade out to the curls to show off my strokes. A giant wave slaps me, pulls me under, tosses me into forward somersaults, backward somersaults, forward, backward, and finally spits me out on the beach where I land on all fours, tangled in seaweed, gasping. My hair droops over my face like a sandblasted curtain. My skin stings. My bottoms are twisted. The breeze tingles my bare butt cheeks. From the corner of my eye, I spot the others in the distance, preparing the barbecue. Relieved that nobody saw me, I suck air deep to keep from sobbing. Are you all right? The Mexican Jesus is talking to me for the first time. I want to throw myself back in the ocean like a reject fish. Here, take my hand. The Mexican Jesus almost saved me. Thank you.
So I met Kai through Wednesday Night Poetry, which normally takes place in Arkansas, but of course, right now in our new lives, everything is taking place online. And this was a series that is long running. It's been going since 1989 and was mentioned in the New York Times at the time that back in the spring when our literary events were shifting over to online. The Arkansas Times named her best poet in Arkansas. And so I think you might agree when you listen to her. So here is Coggin.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for the welcome. And Susana, thank you for bringing me into the fold here. I'm truly honored to share some space with you. I recognize so many of your names from books and stuff, so I'm just honored to be here right now. I'm going to start with a poem from my latest collection, Incandescent. And because July 4th was just so recent, I wrote this poem on the 5th of July, 2017, and it's called A Fifth of Your Lies. America, last night you blasted rockets' red glare into the still night air, and it sounded more like bombs to me than ever before. Sounded more like a broken song than to this country I still belong. Brown woman, queer, you are no longer welcome here. And to get through the 4th of July, I had to drink a fifth of your lies. Wasted, hazy, blurred, stuttered and stirred, swallowed down, burning here in my gut. Another day of the Twitter troll punching and wrestling journalists. The president has a right to attack back, they say, flaunting his disgusting misogyny. It's just a joke, they say. Bucking to nuclear war powers like a bull in a china shop. Finally, someone is standing up, they say. An administration built on lies. My God, how low we have stooped from the beacon that we once were. Inverted light. America, becoming great again, bringing out all this hate again. To get through the 4th of July, I had to drink a fifth of your lies crammed down my throat, despite my blue vote from a mouth I despise. It smelled like rising fear. It tasted like defeat and black and brown people's tears and bright crushed cherries, how far down we have buried our principles. Words like honor, truth, independence, freedom, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. America, divided and breaking, we wave our flags upside down and watch silent as the words of a declaration dissipate into nothing, like the smokes from the fireworks that sound more like bombs to me than ever before. So I thought I would, thank you. I thought I would start off with a bang. My rage and righteousness through poetry has only grown over the last 4 years of this administration. So I hope that we all vote in November. The next few poems I'm going to read are ones that I wrote during National Poetry Month. I did the 30-30 challenge and, you know, happened to write 30 poems this year because there was nothing else to do. So the first poem is called Into Wildflower, Into Field. Oh, by the way, I just got married on Friday. I married the love of my life of 12 years, and we just got married. So I'm going to share a few love poems. I'm just so happy to be able to say these are about my wife, Joanne. That's the first time I've said that in a reading. So, into wildflower, into field. It's dusk, and I watch you water our newly planted garden. The radish and arugula are first to push up through the soil. Green hands in prayer unfolding towards sun and sky, and I sit on the sidelines and write as you coax them toward you. It's like you're singing invisibly to the sleeping bed of seeds, like I can see the vibration of your gentle harvest hope. My own fingers begin searching the earth. My body bends toward the light of you. I green into a personal spring. My seeds break open again and again, searching for sun and sky. Constant gardener, you water the drought of me into wildflower, into royal meadow, into fields and fields. Did you ever think our lives would bloom into this? On the ridgeline, the setting day paints us in an impermanent gold. But even now, in the dark of night, everything is still glowing. Thank you. This is another short one about gardening. I had never gardened before. It just wasn't my bag, but since the pandemic, I've become kind of a gardener. So this one is called Essence. I thinned the seeds already sprouting in the bamboo garden, the radish, beet, carrot, and bean, pulled each birth out of the earth and laid it on my tongue, crushed it with my teeth. And did you know these tiny sprouts, these little leaves and baby greens already hold the heavy flavors of their final selves? If only we tasted our own essence from birth, knew the transformations to come were all part of the becoming, and that we had the imprint all along. Thank you. This last poem I wrote on a day, it was close to Memorial Day, and it was when we marked 100,000 of our countrymen dying of COVID-19. And I'm going to end with this poem. Again, thank you, Susana, for bringing me into the fold, and thank you everyone for your open hearts and for listening. This is called Makeshift Memorial. We crossed over the 100,000 mark like it was just another Tuesday. No fanfare, no flourish of flowers left on 100,000 graves. Funeral-less limbo walkers who disappear like a fog into the history we are writing with our collective inadequacy to be decent to each other. A memorial is an object which serves as a purpose and a focus for the memory or commemoration of something. usually an influential deceased person or a tragic historical event. From behind a mask, I whisper 100,000 names on the day that we call Memorial, because something should be done to remember the living as they slip away. The uptick in numbers that were never just numbers, but bodies full of breath, full of breath, full of breath, knees and arms, ankles and bellies, cheeks that dimpled at smiles, gaps in teeth, snores when she sleeps, feet that once learned to tango, earlobes that were kissed in moonlight, curls of hair silkened to white, his aching back who worked so hard, her childbearing hips leaving children behind, hands and hands and hands reaching out for mine in my mind. Not just numbers, but human beings, reduced until the only common denominator is how quickly they are forgotten in this pandemonium pandemic. I can't sit with that. No, not today. On Memorial Day, we remember those who fought for our country and died, but half the country forgot those fighting in ICU beds just to stay alive. The collective death toll of our last 4 wars. And half of the country, they don't want to quarantine anymore. 100,000 dead while America throws pool parties. Beaches and boardwalks swarm with shoulder-to-shoulder crowds who dismiss the safety of the future for the party of now. Because this is America, land of the free, and don't tread on me, and nobody's going to tell me to wear a mask. And all of those soldiers who died in all of those wars. I guess America can tell them it's too much to ask to protect one another and slow the damn spread. So happy Memorial Day. 100,000 are dead. A mass grave of indifference. Red-capped rebels drinking their bleach cocktails, and they are here banging on the door of my reverence to the lost, waving their AR-15s on the Capitol steps of this poem. And I breathe them out, and I breathe them out, and I breathe them out. I make a makeshift memorial in my heart for the lives we have lost. Photos and teddy bears and scraps of poems. I light 100,000 candles in the pit of my rib cage so that when I speak, only the light of them releases into the dark night of this country. I dance with their 100,000 ghosts. I lay their favorite flowers at all of their perfect feet. In the language of the heart, I know their favorite flowers. And I lay a bright "She Loves Me" petal on each of their lips so they can breathe easy the ethers of beauty while they rise into becoming anew. We have to give them that grace. Even just a thought, a well wish into the stars, we have to give them that grace. 140,000 now. Tomorrow in America, a new story will take our focus, will move us into fury or collapse us into numbness. But today, I make a makeshift memorial out of my body, a mouth full of epitaphs, a funeral pyre that is burning the sound of 140,000 names into a history of a country too quick to forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kai. I want to thank both Liz and you for showing us that a poet doesn't have to choose between the lyrical and the political. There's absolutely no reason why we can't address both in our poems. Bravo to both.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, truly. Thank you very much. A pleasure.
I'm honored.
Pleasure to hear the work. Well, hopefully we'll run this series long enough that we can bring poets back and have them read again So our third poet today is Marsha de la O. One of the goals of this reading series is to nurture a sense of curiosity by poets on the West Coast about poets working on the East Coast, and for poets on the East Coast to learn about poets working on the other side of the country. Fortunately, we are not starting out as total strangers. In addition to having several collections of poetry out, today's third poet, Marsha de la O, has also worked as an editor of a poetry magazine which published the title poem of Susana H. Case's most recent collection. If Marsha de la O showed an eye and an ear for an outstanding poem in making that choice, it's simply a reflection of her own acute imagination and ability to go beyond the surface blending of metaphor into the deeper wisdom of lingering symbols. I present today, for your pleasure, Marsha de la O.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Susana and Lynn, for putting this together. I'm really excited to be here. It's a big honor. I have 4 poems. They're mostly new poems. This first one is a kind of a skewed love poem. It's called What Metal Remembers. Yes, I buried a mason jar in that flower bed next to our rented cottage, a lock of your hair inside and a silver ring you rarely wore. What would I give to climb those stone steps once more, enter the tangle of violet and cosmos, onyx lips parted, stalks sturdy enough in this drought for only a single bloom, one star face with its burning center. What would I give to kneel and scrabble at our earth with naked fingers? I could offer all the drowned bills I possess, my cloak of feathers, my chain mail, these mother of pearl combs, for a chance to touch your black hair again, that lock darker and younger than we ever were. I would do it. I want to slip our broken promise onto my hand, however tarnished, insistent, accustomed to your thicker flesh. Even after years in darkness among roots, weaving and unweaving their truths, I'm sure metal still remembers you. And yes, it is true. Seeds will scatter from the lowliest of blooms, and one substance imparts its essence to another. So too I see how willingly I take up residence in the night, singing a song of night. Just like that, I buried the mason jar. Thank you. Okay, the next poem is a poem about my father. He is very old, and I have been in a lot of contact with him these last 2 years. It's called The Day I Was Protected. I am the harsh sound a tool makes, a small cutting wheel scoring a surface, scribing a line. Briefly, intense heat is generated. Briefly, the glass cries out a hurting sound. They wound each other in their touching, steel and annealed glass. The glazier is angry but careful. He taps along the line he's made and breaks the glass with his hands, moving quickly. He doesn't wear gloves. He picks up the cutter to score the next piece. Have you ever felt a hive mind, a swarm in light that falls slant, a presence? The glazier is my father. In those days, stained glass comes from Europe in boxes in the hulls of freighters. I am 8 years old. My father is making a lantern for my mother, but he stops when the man comes in. I use a box cutter to slit the seams. Rondelles from Belgium stacked inside. Lift out honey-colored discs and hold them up to high windows. The column of my arm, my candelabra fingers. My father lets me play with glass, with lead, with box cutters. I never touch the soldering iron. He's angry at the man who came in from the loading dock, a small, thick man in a sports jacket. Did you know dragonflies see more light than us? Their eyes absorb colors beyond our range, and they catch the image faster. A ripple in the amplitude of air. Their brains evolved to process light. Blood, thrumming, drum heart, knocking, throat clenched. The harsh sound of breath shuttles through my narrow passage. The man is talking to my father. First, he makes a purchase. The lantern my father made for my mother. My father sold my mother's gift. Then the man asks, how much for the little girl? My father laughs and says she's not for sale. The man begins to bid. He offers a price, then a higher one. Not for sale, says my father. Another offer, and another. Outside, cars are stopped on Western Avenue waiting for the light to change. I look over at my father transfigured, his eyes opaque, his milk glass eyes that do not see, his metallic hands, fists tight, holding the cutter, bearing down on an ache of glass, snick of the wheel, sharp hone of steel, abrupt crack, white sound of breaking shoots across the sheet. He's ripping glass in two, over and over. Glass is shrieking under his weight. The glass howls, the glass screams. He keeps working head down. There are no words. That was the day I was protected. The man paid $50 for the lantern and offered $100 for the child. I knew that day my father loved me more than he needed money, and we did need money. I knew that day I had a home. The walls were made of glass. There was a horizon beyond. Now, poetry is a place where I can go home to myself safely. There were days when I couldn't be protected. In a poem, you can work with grief, you can laugh out loud, you can order the world according to your lights. Finally, you don't have to run away from yourself. You can go home. Thank you. This next poem, thanks. This next poem is for our dear friend Ellen Reich. She was so beloved of us. And she received a terminal diagnosis at the beginning of March and passed May 1st. This poem I wrote in April. It's called Velocities. Velocities. Oh, woman with the salt wind in your mouth, with a phalanx of gulls on their way to their fortress in the clouds. You are a faraway cirque of purest agate at 10,000 feet, where turquoise taught you to brood into aqua. When you take small sips of air among pear trees, among orange blossoms and tight apples, light knows your name, Ellen. It lays down at your verge like a lion, because you've become finally the reverse kiss of spring with its velocities and dark horsemen galloping behind your breastbone. When you walk the wet sand, fish celebrate nuptials in the nearest wave in your name. because you understand how all bright silver things must pull back into themselves. Beyond all the chatter and even the tears, you are the scar the plum sews onto its own skin when sugar splits it open. You're brimming over. Thank you. And this last poem is along the lines of say the names of those who have been lost, shot by the police. And this is for Ernesto Garcia, who was shot by the police in our town of Ventura quite a while ago. He was killed the same week a bearer wandered into the city. It's called What It Takes. And I have to wonder what life means by us. Since that day, I heard Ernesto scrambled out of the locked ward on Hillmont. The same afternoon, a distressed bear lumbered into the warren of little houses off the avenue. Deputies chasing him. A 300-pound infant padding toward mistaken water. It was one of those mornings, a fat, pale moon still rolls in the turquoise, and a woman stoops to pick up the star, early edition. Scientists awakens bacteria in gut of bee doomed in amber eons ago. And next to that, another story, Ernesto, in the last shape ever burned into anyone's eye. A shot his buddy snapped, not grasping, it was final. Ernesto knew not to smile for the birdie, to look past the apparatus to a place where words trail off into a tangle of fireweed and sumac. All that grief where nothing human holds. Sundown, a big, dark man barefoot in a hospital gown, cornered past the parking lot, copter thumping overhead, shouting through tears, what am I supposed to do? Until it became the moan rumbling through a bear in his sleep. He crumpled when the gun fired, his mouth filling with nothing. I keep seeing him make for the hills behind the mental ward, bare feet sliding on bits of quartz around islands of cactus, running the shadow pulse of an older world. Eye of skunk, his clean and dangerous stare in the scrub laurel. 3 hours inside city limits before they hit the bear with a tranq dart. He crumpled when the gun fired, mouth filling with sleep, winched him in a sling and trucked him deep into the wild. Maybe that bear's alive, dreaming in his bones or shambling through the understory, one huge paw shoveling for grubs, light snowing the way it does at those altitudes around his dark head. Maybe he's snuffling air, learning to savor wind, beginning to taste what it takes to go on, what life wants. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to introduce Gerry LaFemina. I started following Gerry LaFemina's work in 2011 when Vanishing Horizons came out. And even if you don't read that book aloud, which I recommend, the cadence guides you through metaphors that deepen unexpectedly, as in Saint Sparrow, in which the speaker comes across the bird's remains amidst the scent of decomposing foliage, a lushness so deep in the nose it becomes a taste, like the supposed smell of a saint's incorruptible body. In that poem, the speaker holds the bird's skeleton in his hands and thus learned the secret of flight. And that moment of discovery is characteristic in Gerry's work. Even in his earliest work, such as Shattered Hours, one of his first two full-length books, which Jean Valentine describes as grounded in this world and full of tenderness and compassion toward all of the awkward things and people who lurch through life there. That praise applies to Gerry's most recent collection, Baby Steps in Doomsday Prepping, prose poems that are driven by the same open appetite for the truth in observation. And in that, I wanted to also mention that he has an early chapbook that came out the year before that, which is really beautiful, called Points South, that Gerry wrote partly while he was on a Fulbright in Brazil. And in that book, in one of the poems, the speaker puts his hand in the surf, not surprised in the least to discover later my fingers smell something like tears, and citrusy and sweaty too, a scent akin to her skin in summer, that perfume I daily, willingly, gladly inhaled, how long ago, and which I can't bathe away. You're gonna really enjoy this reading by Gerry LaFemina, and it will linger on the skin. Please welcome Gerry LaFemina.
Geez, Lynn, why don't you just read all the poems for me? That would make my life so much easier. Lynn, thank you. Susana, thank you. Bill, thank you. I'm happy to see so many friends and happy to be reading with such fine, fine poets. I'm gonna jump right in. This is a poem called American Poetry. It's in memory of Thomas Lux, who was my dear teacher and dear friend. And there was a CDC guidelines that said they couldn't use 6 words or phrases anymore. And there was a challenge for us to use those 6 words or phrases, and that's where this came out. American Poetry. I recognize these claims I make are not science-based. I praise American poetry's diversity, for its diversity is its strength. Each poem conceived in a climax of inspiration, an image or an overheard phrase, or a word banned by bureaucrats, committees, or point-totaling politicians, or you name it. Then the gestation of drafts. I'm aware this is a terrible metaphor, but the poem becomes fetus and eventually gets its entitlement of a title. Most Americans don't care, don't read poems any more than they read medical journals. They remain ambivalent about peer reviews. Not that it matters. Nor does it matter that sometimes revisions are transgenred, prose poems longing for lineation and vice versa, verse free and formal both, believing it should be a paragraph, wanting only the cadence of the sentence. How vulnerable each word, each syllable. What evidence-based claims might the critics down the hall make with their deconstructions about these matters? I couldn't construct their hypotheses or their outcomes, only know the myths of their methodologies. I wouldn't want anything else. I recognize my claims are not science-based, but I praise American poetry for its diversity. Its diversity is its strength. So this is called Schrodinger's box. We all know about the cat in the box. This is Schrodinger's box. Forget the cat. The box, not a cat box, but a box fit for a cat is what's important. How magical it must be that we can't know what's inside, whether what we left there remains. More like mother's pocketbook. how things vanished within till they were found again. Money, lifesavers, what have you. Is it cardboard, plastic, wooden with brass hinges and a small latch? Science doesn't specify, but all of physics must be inside, like the Ark of the Covenant, like a safe for the Hope Diamond, like the ring box for the engagement never engaged. Does the love still exist? What is that hurt, that yowling? So it's summer. Here's an ice cream poem, so to speak. It is called How I Learned Cruelty. I made a model snowman out of 3 scoops of vanilla ice cream, some chocolate sprinkles for eyes and a nose. Then I let him melt, there in the bowl, the slow metamorphosis of solid to liquid, his features uglifying, getting less defined, till he fell over, a white puddle growing. My spoon in the dish, like a gravedigger's shovel. I'm going to read one more prose poem, and then I'm going to read a poem from Point South. This is called Mackerel and Bottle. It's based on a painting by the Irish painter William Scott, and the whole book is interspersed by paintings by ekphrastics that engage mostly painting. Mackerel and Bottle. Not the holy mackerel of the exclamation, nor the ones caught and served by the disciples to feed 5,000. Nope, only ordinary mackerel. 2 of them for the 2 of us waiting for the frying pan. The wine, too, from the liquor store's middle shelf for our middle class aspirations, a middling white open to breathe. But there's only 1 glass set out, for I've remembered you'd gone. Thus, I've invited the overcast skies inside. Don't be condescending. I haven't been crying. That's only condensation moist on my cheek. Despite my prayers for intercession, my supplications for your safe return, I don't say grace. Instead, I cook the fish whole, plate them that way, so their eyes gaze at me while I dine, desperate as I am for company. This is my last poem I'm going to read. It's named Florianopolis, which is a city and a region in southern Brazil where I spent a lot of time. And there is a bridge called the Hercílio Lopes Bridge. It was designed by the same engineer who designed the Golden Gate. It has not fared well. It's in disrepair, it's unused, but it still remains there. Florianopolis. Less than a century ago, Hercílio Lopes envisioned the bridge, so engineers arrived to unspool spun cables, set girders, while steel workers riveted and welded high above the Baía Norte till that span rose like a cathedral, first church of modernism. How quickly the metal succumbed to salines mosquito stings, and rust like algae spread, and soon newer bridges that could accommodate more traffic were blueprinted and built. So now that first one, that handsome exoskeleton, is a husk imperious over the Ilha de Palmares. I watch it decline from my room, where whatever decadent designs I had went unpacked or else lost by the airlines. In Parque de Luz below, the great-grandchildren of Santa Catarina kick footballs or sell handcrafted bracelets and use CDs from blankets and suitcases. Want is everywhere. Some offer beers, bottles green like chlorophyll leaves in daylight. They grow dimly as if seen from far away. A woman plays an acoustic guitar, a song that rises to my balcony. And although her tongue is alien and sultry, I recognize its lilting tale of heartache and triumph. How is it that in a place sensual in a manner ad men pitch, seawater rippling resplendent, palm trees and flamboyance wind giddy, nostalgia arrives with its attendant melancholy. Her song recalls the early morning birds that filled the London plane trees in a zip code I was banished from, lowly pigeons, how I missed their dull fatigues, missed too how despite my feeding them often, when I approached they took flight in moss, an outburst of wing flurry forming a shadowy angel of loss. Despite its disrepair, no one calls for tearing down that bridge. It remains a source of pride, for there's so much grace in ruin. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerry. I can assure you that Tom Lux would have loved hearing that work. My spoon in the dish like a grave digger's shovel. I can already see Tom's face lighting up at that line. So thank you very much. The third poet from the West Coast today is Mike Sonksen. Poets are usually valued for a sense of individual voice, but what especially impresses me about Mike, the poet Sonksen's performance of his poems, is that his voice seems plural. It is not enshrined in solitude, but rather projects itself as a distinct trajectory of hope and pain and joy coming out of a vast chorus of those who want to speak, but find themselves overwhelmed by circumstance. Some of what I would like to say sometimes, but can't find a way to articulate in my own poems, surfaces in Mike's poems, which pivot on a Brechtian bluntness to offer unexpected solace. I present Mike Sonksen.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you, everybody. Fantastic to see you. Here's to another beautiful day. This first poem I'm going to do is a poem that actually came after a visit to Bill's class 3 years ago at Cal State Long Beach. I was talking to his students about writing and how I began my own writing. And I said something to the students. I said, you know, the riots are the week before my prom. And Bill said, you know what, can you write a poem about that, Mike? I'm gonna give you an assignment. So I wrote this poem. The riots were the week before my prom. A month and a half before graduation, Southern California was a time bomb. Race relations worn like Vietnam. My crew more like the United Nations. The riots were the week before my prom. SoCal needed mindfulness like Thich Nhat Hanh. Multicultural coalitions for communication. Southern California was a time bomb. Tired citizens needed a new song. All the broadcasts played nonstop frustration. The riots the week before my prom. 3 months later, I moved out of my mom's. UCLA, my emancipation. Southern California was a time bomb. Poetry and music made it more calm. Journal writing became my salvation. The riots of the week before my prom. Southern California was a time bomb. All right, so thank you so much. This next poem is a poem I wrote for my students. It's titled Traces, Places, Faces. Traces, places, faces, connecting spaces, cultural, historical, personal, 3 realms of interpretation, channels for communication, a way to Rainy Mountain. We slow down the conversation, writing morning pages, positions of contemplation, bridging liminal spaces, interdisciplinary relations, intersecting history and geography. Biography, tracing the lineage through journeys, natures, conflicts, knowledges, LA stories, print, sound, light, fight the good fight. My students write about personal artifacts like the ring gifted to them by their grandfather after the Armenian genocide. We put the heart in liberal arts, traces, uncovering a series of marks, an outline, a passage, a record, or physical indication of something that vanished, an etching. A great turning of pages. Take time to see the traces. Observations in an essay, a litany of lyrics, critical cartography, public history, cultural geography, ecofeminism, and deep ecology. My students and I took a walk along the concrete river talking about man versus nature. Places. I met my wife in a piano bar downstairs from the hip hop room, a circle of friends singing on the dance floor. Every day is your birthday. Social locations, navigation, a locale, a locus, location, a station, a designated area of meaningful activity, a center of memory, a region, a facility, a landmark, a natural site, a waterfall, an architectural marvel, connected to experience, an open mic, a Socratic dialogue, two feral cats in my backyard, faces. Back in the 1980s, I was picking mint leaves with my grandmother in Long Beach. People are a beacon, family, women and men in the city, friends, colleagues, associates, long-lost cohorts from childhood, aces of the neighborhood, uniting heart and mind, together spending time. Let's bring it back to the work that reconnects. Building community, draw your history, a reframing, intergenerational exchanging. Historiography, sharing authority, autoethnography, it comes back to you and me sharing space, traces, places, faces. This next poem is an ode to a woman named Judy Baca, who's one of the most prolific muralists alive. She's actually painted over 100 murals. She has a mural in LA called the Great Wall of Los Angeles that is 2,800 feet long. Up until recently, it was the longest mural in the world. I guess now in Korea, there's a mural that's 50 feet longer than it, but it's an amazing mural. And she actually got between 350 and 400 young people, mostly at-risk kids, to help her paint this mural. And she painted it over 5 summers from 1976 to 1984. Beautiful mural. And it's called the Great Wall of Los Angeles. So this is my ode to Judy Baca. Judy Baca paints to interrogate. Whose monument where? Whose story do we tell? Baca paints public history, inventory in the inner city. The Chumash animal spirits escaped the La Brea tar pits, canoeing to the Channel Islands with a school of blue dolphins. California was Turtle Island before Gente de Razon colonized. Long before Cabrillo and Portola, grizzlies roamed the flora of marshlands and willow thickets, the legend of Khalifa. Junipero Serra envisioned 21 Spanish missions, 44 pobladores built the Pueblo. The Great Wall of Los Angeles travels chronologically, recording social memory, the technicolor trajectory of the city beneath, Spanish land grants and Pio Pico, California ranchos, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the California Gold Rush, Sutter's Mill to San Francisco, Joaquin Murrieta, the original Zorro. Chinese built the railroad only to be massacred in 1871, the largest mass lynching in American history. The rise of California's citrus, see the selected traditions, collisions at the crossroads, unsigned Indian treaties, the boom of the 1880s, LA mountains to the shore, women in the war riding the red car. The California aqueduct draining the Owens Valley, children working in factories, striking workers, the market crash, prohibition. You better speak easier, the cops will come. People's history profiles women and people of color, celebrating civic identity, honoring ancestors. David Alfaro Siqueiros, Olvera Street in America Tropical, facadism and a whitewashed adobe. City fathers whitewashed your mural, but they can't whitewash history. Polyangular perspective, a hazardous metropolis, environmental justice, Boyle Heights to Manzanar, the 442nd Battalion, the Go for Broke unit, Brooklyn Avenue is Jewish, the Red Scare and McCarthyism, division of the barrios, concretizing an ancient river, forebears of civil rights, destruction of Chavez Ravine, popular culture in the age of white flight. Farewell to Rosie the Riveter, goodbye to Dust Bowl refugees, the Great Train robbery, illusions of prosperity. Baca paints what City Hall forgot. Luisa Moreno in the Bracero program, Dr. Charles Drew's influence, David Gonzalez in Pacoima, the federal highway system, the birth of rock and roll stole soul from Big Mama Thornton. An age of appropriation, erasure, and assimilation, our shared human condition. A choreographed dance, singing gospel from the streets. We fight fascism at home and abroad. Who we can be in solidarity. Uprising of the mujeres, honoring stories. Mi abuelita, mural making a social practice. Organizing a ofrenda, collaborate first, then paint. Calling all couch potatoes. Sing the song of suburbia, somewhere in San Fernando. Turn on your television set. Turn up in your tract house. Take up the sword of justice. Be on the lookout for monarch butterflies. A new era of art and expansion. End housing segregation. Right the wrongs of repatriation. Okay, boomer, come along Coldwater Canyon. The battle for Los Angeles. Reconciling historic narratives. Whose story do we tell? Whose monument where? And my last poem is the first poem in my book. I'm still alive in Los Angeles. I'm still alive in Los Angeles, even as the price of rent rises and gridlock strangles central arteries. I'm old enough to remember disco parties and the build-up to the 1984 Olympics and news reporters like Jerry Dunphy and Hal Fishman. I remember when Fernando Valenzuela was a rookie. Years before I loved Wanda Coleman and Bukowski, my first LA poets were Chick Hearn and Vince Scully. Then I read Mike Davis and Carrie McWilliams and watched The Gospel of Huell Hauser, looking at things that aren't here anymore. Recalling former glory like Ralph's story, I'm still exploring from Panorama City to Pomona. I'm still alive in Los Angeles as they build high-speed trains down Crenshaw and out into the San Gabriel Valley. Changes in transportation for the new generation foreshadow the nation's transformation as millennials on bicycles call for return of the Garden City. Green in the 21st century is a matter of survival. Witness the revival of the wetlands. The riparian watershed is a sentinel for sustainability. Unbridled consumption is a liability. Observe residents of Angel City playing their part to restore nature's heart. I'm still alive in Los Angeles, from festivals to funerals, baby showers to weddings. Each generation ever more beautiful. Reality is ever musical. Throngs of people mix and match, creating the patchwork mosaic of multicultural souls coming together to call LA home. The community is a poem in progress called Los Angeles. The angels and a city singing synchronicity from Central to Century City. Olympic was 10th Street and Pio Pico was the last governor of California when it belonged to Mexico. He was born a Spanish citizen. See the city's Zen soaring to Satoy on a Saturday morning, circling the Evergreen Cemetery or hiking up hills in Culver City. I'm still alive in Los Angeles as mamas monitor laundromats. From Lankershim to Long Beach, I walk the long streets from Magnolia to Manchester, Rosemead to Redondo Beach. I'm still alive in Los Angeles, though there's no more open space. Most of the wetlands have been replaced by condos, Trader Joe's and makeshift dog parks, and expanding corporate heart charts, a frenzied facelift of a never-ending Christmas, but only a few are on that wish list. There's a generation of kids on Snapchat and commuters want that fast track. Alive in Los Angeles. I'm still alive in Los Angeles thanks to family, friends, and poetry. The past, present, and future of my city gives me energy. Untold generations of history from Biddy Mason to Chavez Ravine to Toyo Miyataki. Punctuating the power of place, turning the page, sharing authority, because we all share the story of the city unfolding. There's no hierarchy. We all belong to this city. It's all her story. I'm still alive in Los Angeles. And today I drive around LA with my son and daughter like I once rode with my grandfather. There's no more Perinos or Brown Derby, but there's still Fosselmans, Coles, Philippe's in the pantry. My children spill ice cream in the back seat with me. Together we are alive in a city of destiny. I am still alive in Los Angeles. I am still alive in Los Angeles. I am still alive in Los Angeles. LA! Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Lynn. Everybody was wonderful. I really appreciate you all. Thank you. Thank you. And much more to come. Lots of love, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was really wonderful. Mike Sonksen. That's the first time I've heard you. You made me miss LA so much. Okay. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Barbara Ungar. Barbara, I actually looked on Facebook, and I think I sent you a message in 2009, I think. I have been stalking this woman on Facebook for a decade, and I just love her work. Barbara Ungar's latest full-length collection, Save Our Ship, is sardonic and wrenching as it sends out a warning for rising seas, dying coral reefs, and endangered animals disappearing by the hour. In the poem Cassandra, we see warnings, archipelagos of plastic trash, flotillas of fire ants. In Man Bun Ken, we see strategies of misogyny applied to a male symbol. All those Man Bun Kens interred in the catacombs of Walmart and Target in plastic wrapped sarcophagi, discounted to nothing. In How It Happens, domestic abuse exists on the slippery slope of denial. Maybe you throw up breakfast for a week, take the baby and run. There are so many ways it can happen. It happens all the time. In Emily Dickinson's estate sale, we glimpse the ecstasy of the imagination, not the cramped rooms in Amherst, her other place, not on any map. As seductive as these scenarios are, none of my observations do justice to the dazzling mastery of language and quiet authority in the poetry of Barbara Ungar as she exposes the human hand in both destroying and rescuing the earth. In her 2020 chapbook, Edge, named after the list of evolutionarily distinct and globally endangered animals, rage and love drive the truth-telling of extinction. It would seem that the more we know, the less we can agree to be complicit through human responsibility, though human responsibility is a process Barbara acknowledges in the heartbreaking poem, The Last Jaguar, which ends, "The jaguar only shows himself to you when you are ready to see him." In her work, we see the jaguar, the octopus, the snail, the bumblebee bat, the greed, the loss, the cruelty of a man who sells turtle eggs, and the kindness of a man who rescues owls. For better or worse, you will probably see yourself reflected somewhere in the work of Barbara Ungar. Please welcome her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Can everybody hear me?
Uh,
Am I on? Is that good? That was beautiful. I'm really moved, and this was 5 such tough acts to follow. Thank you so much, Lynn, for finding me. Thank you, Susana and Bill. Kai, I'm going to start with my Memorial Day poem. This is Memorial Day 2020. The epigraph is, "Everything is getting terrible," which some of you may recognize. It's Red Sammy from A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. Red Sammy is the one who actually says the title. And I'm also this is the one with the grandmother and the misfit. So the misfit's gonna come in a little bit later on in the poem. Memorial Day 2020. Siberia is burning. The grandmother forgets how to answer the phone. It was all predicted long ago. Fire, flood, plague. How could we not know? She would have been a good woman if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. The gun is already at our heads, but we don't see. It's too big or too small. The plague is just the beginning. As an Oedipus, we clever ones, busy tracking down the cure, will be revealed to be the very source of the plague. The murderers, motherfuckers. Then the horror, suicide, self-blinding, the chorus moaning. All the ways we fool ourselves while running smack at disaster. Minneapolis is burning. The grandmother forgets how to answer the phone. It was all predicted long ago. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from Save Our Ship next. I am from Minneapolis, and I'm going to read one of the poems that Lynn quoted, Man Bun Ken. Just a note, in Minneapolis, we like to call Target Target. We think it gives it class before we burn it down. This is Man Bun Ken. Poor Man Bun Ken getting teased on Twitter. Will meme girls make Man Bun Ken kill himself? They've been mutilating Barbie for years. Who will ever buy Man Bun Ken, a steal at only $9.99? All those Man Bun Kens interred in the catacombs of Walmart and Target, in plastic-wrapped sarcophagi, discounted to nothing or shipped off to Asia, where men can wear buns and not look like twits. It's not easy being a guy in a Barbie world. He was always only an accessory. Who ever actually cared for Ken in his painted-on trunks and terry-lined Hawaiian beach jacket? Now Ken comes in 3 sizes, original, broad, and slim, like a cigarette. 7 skin tones, 8 hair colors, and 9 hairstyles. Cornrow Ken, buzz cut Ken, shaggy dog Ken, and quiff, whatever that is, Ken. Give it up, Ken. We've been there before, says Teen Vogue. You've got to find yourself, the real you. Alas, the real Ken died of AIDS decades ago. Future archaeologists may stumble upon his simulacra and mistake him for a shape-shifting god, the cyclically dying and reborn consort of the great goddess, Barbie. And I'm going to do the title poem, Save Our Ship. It's got some found elements from a New York Times Magazine article on rising oceans. Also, the impetus for the poem was my consort, who loves to fish, was fishing in the ocean out of his kayak, and his old-fashioned cell phone, last clamshell in America, fell out of his pocket to the bottom of the ocean. So he challenged me to write a poem who answers this phone. While he was fishing in his kayak, my 2 sisters and I swam past, and he said, "Oh, look, mermaids." And my little sister said, "No, mercrones." So the mercrone appears in here along with the Fisher King, which I stole from T.S. Eliot. Save Our Ship. Your clamshell rings and rings, wrapped in sea green plastic. Mercrone calling Fisher King. The number you are calling has a voicemail box that has been deluged. A drowned sailor picks up. Crusts of dried salt in the streets. You're breaking up. The tide of pink jellyfish, big as washing machines, rises. Ocean's hurricane voice calling back could crush your skull. Wake up, wake up, wake up. You've overslept. All your calendars are drowned. The only road is disappearing beneath the sea. The inundation of the coast has begun. The sea is now so near the brim. SOS, ... dash, 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 ... dash, 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 ... I don't know if you can see it, but the poem ends in Morse code. The SOS Morse code turns into ocean waves. I don't know if that comes across visually. So that's SOS, Save Our Ship. And I'm going to read a couple from Edge and finish there. So I'm going to read one individual species poem and one more general poem. The world's tiniest tarantula, Microhexura montivaga. Small as a BB, hidden under emerald moss on rocks, eating springtails in funnel-like webs, the spruce fir moss spider lives high up in the great Smoky Mountains. Their moss is drying out, their ancient forests skeletonized by an invader from Europe, the woolly adelgid. Who wants to save the tarantulas? Who even knows these exist? What little I knew of tarantulas came from Dr. No, the first James Bond film we saw at the mall one Christmas. Sean Connery's arachnophobia impressed me as much as Ursula Andress rising from the sea in a white bikini did my dad and brother. In a black bikini in the Bahamas, the first time I saw a live tarantula, I screamed. Our landlord, Errol Simonet, laughed and picked it up gently. Monkey-faced spider won't hurt you. The way the local diving boys laughed at our fear of sharks. You just punch them in the nose. We laughed at their fear of walking down the street in New York. Don't you get shot? No. We have met Dr. No, and he is us. And I'm going to finish with Wait This is taken from the Biomass Distribution on Earth, which is a study from the proceedings in the National Academy of Sciences of the US, back when we had science in the US. They measured and they calculated how much everything alive on the planet weighs, and the statistics were amazing. So I made this poem from it. Weight. Having measured life on Earth, we're found wanting. Humans, a mere 1/100th of the living. Life proves to be mostly trees. Only 100th in the 7 seas. 1/8 buried, bacteria. Underground, more than 1,000 times more bacteria than us. Even worms outweigh us, 3 to 1. So does the lowly virus. Yet we have paved the earth with chicken bones. Weep into your soup. Under 1/3 of birds fly free. The rest, poultry. Garden turned feedlot and slaughterhouse. Homo sapiens, 1/3 of all mammals, keep almost 2/3 to eat, mostly cow and pig. Only 4% left for all wild creatures, elephant to mouse. Half Earth's creatures have vanished in the last half-century, while we've redoubled. Even half gone, plants outweigh us, 7,500 to 1. May they survive the plague of us. Thank you.
Barbara Ungar, that was fabulous. All our poets tonight, Barbara Ungar, going backward, Mike Sonksen, Gerry LaFemina, Marsha de la O, Kai Coggin, and Liz Gonzalez. You're all wonderful. I often don't look at the chat because it's hard to listen to the poetry and also watch the chat, but I did notice someone posted, wow, so many great poets, and it's true. It was a fabulous evening of poetry, and thank you for everyone who came. Our next event is September 13th. You can remember that is the Sunday after 9/11, and we'll be announcing the readers and posting it on Facebook. And contact either me or Lynn or Bill to get the link for that event. So thank you so much. And buy books, because poets need you to buy their books. So there in the chat are links to all the books.
Thank you, poets.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
you so
everybody. What an
much.
honor.
Doug.
Thank you.
Thanks.